Chapter 10. Heroes Fall Ill at Dongyu Temple. Poem. Adversity reveals heaven's will, and the resolve to rise is profound. Carved into beautiful jade, forged into fine gold. Bones grow old with poverty and sorrow, plans sink with hardship. Do not let frequent setbacks cause tears to silently wet your lapel. Nowadays, people complain of heaven when they encounter minor misfortunes. They do not know that heaven, in its intention to shape a person, treats them as if they were already in dire straits. The more people try to help them, the less they can be helped. Not to mention poverty and sorrow, even illness will be dealt with, and even when they find life in the most desperate situation, it seems unwilling to let them go. Wang Badeng and Li Xuansui rushed out of the city to the west for Xubao, and by the time they reached Erxianzhuang, it was already late at night. Xingxin's manor gate was already closed. Hearing the dogs barking urgently outside, Xingxin ordered the gate open to see who was walking in front of his manor. He took a few steps out of the manor and looked closely. It was Wang and Li, his two friends. The three men entered the manor hand in hand. The horses were unsaddled and fed in the stables, while the men went to stay in the side rooms. Xingxin's men brought over a prayer mat, and he and his two friends bowed and sat down. Xingxin ordered tea and wine to be served. After catching up, Badeng said, "I heard that you are pleased to have acquired a fine horse today, brother." Xingxin replied, "To tell you the truth, I bought a magnificent steed for 30 taels of silver today." Badeng said, "We knew beforehand that it was a fine horse, but one should never try to gain a small advantage. If you do, you will suffer a great loss." Xingxin asked, "Could this horse have been stolen?" Badeng replied, "The horse was not stolen. Tell me who sold it to you." Xingxin said, "It's a man from Shandong surnamed Wang. I was so pleased with it that I didn't spend much time with him. How did you know about this, brother? Are you perhaps acquainted with that man surnamed Wang?" "What?" Badeng said, "We're not acquainted with the Wang family, but the Wang family is quite familiar with you, brother. Frankly speaking, the horse seller is Qin Xubao. We met at the shop in the West Gate, and he gave us a gift after we talked about our friendship." Xingxin nodded and sighed. "I wondered why this man seemed hesitant to speak. So it's Xubao, where has he gone now?" Badeng said, "He's staying at Wang Xiaoer's shop in the west of the city. He'll be returning to Jinan soon." Xingxin said, "We don't need to sleep anymore. We can sit and wait for dawn with this wine." Wang and Li said in unison, "That's right." The three of them drank until dawn. It was truly singing and laughing, forgetting day and night, waking and sleeping like heroes. They prepared all the horses, and even took an empty horse for Xubao to ride. The three of them rushed into the West Gate, went to Wang Xiaoer's shop, and asked about Xubao, but he was already gone. Wang Xiaoer, fearing his good friend would catch up and reveal his misdeeds, didn't mention that Xubao was walking, saying, "Master Qin is in a hurry to get back. He has a messenger on the way back and is heading back to Shandong tonight." Even if there were a horse, Xingxin, unleashing his mighty steed, would have caught up. Suddenly, a piece of bad news arrived from home. Xingxin's elder brother had left Chang'an and was shot dead by an arrow from Tang Gong, who was granted the post of imperial messenger. His men were escorting the funeral procession back. Xingxin wanted to rush to his brother's funeral and could not catch up with his friend. Seeing that Xingxin was in trouble, Wang and Li, his two friends, also abandoned their plan to catch up with Xubao and dispersed. Xubao, having walked since dusk the previous night until dawn, had only covered 5 li, approximately 2.5 kilometers. Misfortunes never come singly. If Xubao had wanted to, he could have covered 100 li. Having sold his horse and still resentful of Wang Xiaoer's taunts, carrying his bag, and feeling increasingly frustrated at having to walk in the dark, he wandered into a mountain valley and lost his way. When dawn broke and he reached the official road, he looked back and saw the walls of Lezhu still behind him, only 5 li away. Wealth and poverty are predetermined by fate, all determined by the year, month, day, and hour. Have ambition in your heart, but don't speak of it. Possess talent in your belly, but don't boast about it. Mediocre people thrive in their time, while heroes suffer misfortune when trapped. Even if you have soaring ambitions, you cannot defy the unpredictable course of fate. Now Xu Bao, being poor, was not the worst of it. He also fell ill from poverty. Having eaten a bowl of cold beef at a shop in the city, and feeling uneasy upon first meeting Wang and Li, coupled with the fact that he had traveled all night, the weather was cold and the frost and dew were heavy, causing internal injury from his diet and catching a chill outside, he was ill. The next day was the second day of the 10th month. His ears were red, his face was hot, his whole body felt like it was on fire, his head was heavy, his eyes were dizzy, and he could barely walk. Despite this, his constitution was still strong, and he managed to walk another 5 li. 10 li from the city was a place called Shili Dayan 10 li shop, with 200 or 300 households. At the entrance to the street was a large temple, the Dongyu Palace. Seeing the temple's grandeur, Xu Bao decided to go inside and bask in the sun before continuing. Entering through the 3 heavenly gates, he ascended a flight of steps to the Dongyu Hall, like climbing a mountain. Reaching the hall, he hoped to worship the gods and seek protection from the underworld. Unexpectedly, his limbs were weak, and he couldn't lift his feet. He felt dizzy and tripped over the threshold, falling at the foot of the incense burner. The loud crash sounded like Gong Gong's anger, knocking down Baju Mountain, or a strong man striking the first emperor's chariot with a hammer. Even if Xu Bao had fallen, it shouldn't have been with such a loud thud. Because he had those 2 golden maces on his back, the fall caused him to shatter 7 or 8 pieces of the millstone. The temple keeper couldn't help him up and rushed to the crane pavilion to report to the abbot. This abbot was no ordinary man. His surname was Wei, his given name was Zhang, and his courtesy name was Xuancheng. He was from Quecheng in Waizhou. Orphaned and impoverished in his youth, he refused to engage in any profession, devoting himself solely to reading. He read everything imaginable, mastering not only the 3 tombs and 5 classics, the 8 trigrams and 9 hills, the works of various philosophers, astronomy, geography, and military strategy, but also poetry and prose, which he excelled at. Furthermore, he possessed great ambition and eagerly befriended heroes and valiant individuals. However, during the Sui dynasty, those with powerful families and influential connections were valued more than the poor and orphaned. The high officials and magistrates of the time were mostly military men, valuing physical strength over literary talent. Lamenting his unfortunate birth, he secluded himself on Mount Hua and became a Taoist priest. Later, he met a fellow Taoist named Su Honk, with whom he shared a deep understanding. Su Honk said, "The Sui emperor is suspicious, and his sons are in charge of military affairs. Even now, with the unification of the empire, it is merely a purge for the true man, not a means to enjoy the spoils. I observe the celestial phenomena. The true man has already been born, and great chaos is about to erupt. You possess an air of nobility, the bones of a high-ranking official, but not the bearing of an immortal. You should prepare a royal advisor in advance, who will rise to power at the opportune time." He spent his days discussing astronomy, geography, strategic planning, and battlefield tactics with Su Honk. One day, Su Honk said to Wei Zhang, "Yesterday, I observed the aura of a king, rising from the Shen and Jiang divisions, indicating the birth of a true man. The Gang star has also entered the Zhao and Wei divisions, signifying the emergence of a timely advisor. However, the aura of a king is not yet fully realized, and the person has not yet achieved his ambitions. The Gang star's color is mostly dark and gloomy, indicating the person will face hardship. It would be better if we went separately to seek him out, forming an alliance before we met, and then we could meet again in the future." Su Honk then went to Taiyuan, while Wei Zheng remained in Lezhou. Seeing that Shang Xingxin was a hero and hospitable man, a founding hero, he took refuge in the Dongyu Temple, hoping to befriend him. He also wanted to find some outstanding individuals to help him in the future. That day, while reciting the asterisk Huang Ting Jiang in the Crane Pavilion, he wrote, "I have no desire to ascend to immortality, but I wish to learn the soaring eagle." A messenger came to report, "A drunkard has fallen in the Dongyu Temple. His weapon has broken several fine bricks. They can't help him up, so they've come to report to the master." Wei Xuancheng thought, "Last night I observed the celestial phenomena. A powerful star was shining upon this place. It must be him. I'll go out myself." Leaving the Crane Pavilion, he went straight to the temple and saw Xu Bao's disheveled state. His luggage was thrown aside unattended. One arm was bent, used as a pillow. The other hand was lame, and he covered his face with his tattered sleeve. The incense burner said, "Just now that foot was still stuck on the threshold, but now it's pulled back down." Wei Xuancheng stepped forward, lifted his sleeve, and looked closely. His face was flushed. He was suffering from a Yang syndrome, similar to drunkenness. He couldn't speak, but his eyes were wide open. Wei Zheng nodded and sighed, "Brother, even in your dire straits, you shouldn't drink so much." Xu Bao understood, but his throat was blocked, and he couldn't speak. After struggling for a while, he stretched out his right hand and wrote the words "illness" on the brick. Although the brick was clean, it was inevitably a little dusty, but the two words were still clearly visible. Wei Xuancheng said, "Brother, you're not drunk, so you're actually unwell." Xu Bao nodded. Xuancheng said, "It's nothing serious." He called to the servant, "Bring my rice dumpling from the room." He placed it in front of Xu Bao, sat down cross-legged, and took Xu Bao's hand on his knee. He checked the pulse at the Kun, Guan, and Kai positions, 4 beats per breath, 4 beats per exhale. It was a Shaoyang syndrome, caused by internal injury from food and drink and external wind cold. It was still a superficial syndrome, nothing serious. However, he couldn't sleep in the main hall because of the wind, and there were no vacant rooms at the back. So the Taoist priest helped him to a side room on the left side of the hall where timber and other materials were piled up. Although it wasn't a proper room, it was sheltered from the wind and rain. Some straw was spread on the ground, a palm fiber mat was placed on top, and Xu Bao was laid down to sleep. The double maces, which no one could lift, were left in the corner of the hall. Xuancheng opened Xu Bao's quilt. Inside were 2 bolts of silk, a purple robe, an official document, and a dozen taels of silver. He said to Xu Bao, "I'm afraid you can't take care of these things while you're sick. I'll keep them in my room until you recover, and then return them to you. As for the double maces, I'll have the Taoist priest twist 2 thick straw ropes, tie them together, and place them at the door of the side room in the corner of the hall. They'll be unmovable, and they'll help ward off some yin energy and evil spirits." Upon hearing this, Xu Bao prostrated himself and kowtowed. Xuancheng packed up his purple robes and silk garments and took them into his room. He prepared a dose of medicine to relieve wind and induce sweating in the Crane Pavilion, brewed it, and gave it to Xu Bao. Xu Bao drank it and broke into a sweat. The next day he felt refreshed and was able to speak. Xuancheng continued to brew medicine for Xu Bao, often sitting by the straw mat with him, gradually adjusting his diet to include rice porridge, and Xu Bao's illness gradually improved. 14 days passed in the blink of an eye. This day was the 15th of the 10th month, the birthday of the 3 primordial stars. The nearby residents were holding a gathering at the Dongyu Temple. The main gates opened at dawn, and the bells and drums were sounded in the hall. Xu Bao, being weak, could not bear it. Although Xuancheng was there to look after him, he had no family to care for him. His face was dirty, his hair disheveled, and his body somewhat filthy, his breath unpleasant. The people at the gathering all disliked him, gossiping amongst themselves. It was truly living in an eggshell, who knows the phoenix? His tracks mixed with whales and sea monsters, who can distinguish the dragon. Generally, Monks and Taoist priests residing in hermitages need one or two wealthy and powerful families as protectors. They also need to provide food and drink to these local ruffians and impoverished households to ensure their safety. Although Wei Xuancheng was a Taoist priest, he still retained his noble character and integrity. How could he possibly stoop to the level of a wealthy family or associate with ruffians? Therefore, everyone complained that the Taoist priest Wei was despicable, harboring unregistered people and defiling the sacred temple. Xiubao, hearing this, was both angry and ashamed. Having nowhere to stay, he happened to encounter Master Shan. Xingxin led his men to the Dongyu temple, intending to perform a ritual for his deceased brother. The leaders of the assembly greeted him from the Three Heavens Gate, saying, "Master Shan, you've come at the perfect time." Xingxin asked, "What is it you wish to say?" The assembly replied, "The Dongyu temple is a place of blessing for our Lezhu people. Master Wei has acted arbitrarily, harboring rogue strangers who have defiled the sacred temple and are unbearable to behold. Master Shan, you must deal with him properly." Xingxin was a man of principle, neither seeking blessings nor foreshadowing disaster. He calmly smiled and said, "Please wait, everyone. Let me speak to him. I have a reason." After explaining his arrival at the main hall, he ordered his men to invite Master Wei out and then strolled around the sidewalks. Suddenly, he saw a beam of light shining from the darkness behind the bell tower. Xingxin went forward for a closer look and saw a pair of double maces, bound together with straw and lying on the ground. Xingxin stared at them intently for a long time before asking the assembly, "Where did these weapons come from?" The assembly of Taoists replied in unison, "They were carried by that sick man." Xingxin was about to ask again when Wei Xuancheng, beaming, stepped forward and bowed to him. Xingxin then asked, "Mr. Wei, my relatives are all here discussing this Dongyu temple. It is a place for seeking blessings in Lezhu, and it must be solemn and clean for people to worship. We hear that you have allowed someone to live in the temple, causing filth and disrespect. We are all displeased, so we specifically ask you, sir, what kind of person is he?" Xuancheng calmly replied, "I am a monk. How could I presume to act on my own? It is only because I saw that this sick man is not an ordinary person that I could not send him away. Moreover, he fell ill while traveling and fell in the hall. I had to treat him with medicine to make him recover. Out of compassion, I hope you will forgive me and convey my regards to all the benefactors." Xingxin hurriedly asked, "Are the double maces at the corner of the hall that man's weapons? Where are they?" "Who is he?" Xuancheng replied. "He's from Kizhu, Shandong." Xingxin, who had been paying attention to Xiubao, was startled to hear Kizhu, Shandong, and hurriedly asked, "What's his surname?" Xuancheng said, "On the second day of that month, he fell in the palace and was unable to speak due to his illness." A reply to an official document listed his name as Qin Qiang. When he recovered the next day, he spoke with him and learned his courtesy name was Xiubao, a descendant of a meritorious official of the northern Qi. Xingxin quickly stopped him and asked, "Where is he now?" Xuancheng pointed and said, "He's staying in this side room." Xingxin took Xuancheng's hand and pushed him through the side door, hurriedly telling his men, "Quickly help Master Qin up to meet us." 3 or 4 men searched the bed, but there was no sign of him. Xingxin said anxiously, "Could he know I'm coming and be hiding somewhere else?" A servant said, "I just saw him go out of the palace to relieve himself. He's probably in the back pavilion now." Upon hearing this, Xingxin quickly went out of the palace with Xuancheng. It turned out that thanks to Wei Xuancheng's medicine, Qin Qiang's illness had subsided after 14 or 15 days of recuperation, and he felt increasingly refreshed. That day, because the weather was warm and he saw the bustling activity in the palace, he went outside. After relieving himself, he sat in the back pavilion to avoid the crowd's disapproval. Just then, a cook came out, carrying several liters of rice in his pocket and several bundles of dried vegetables. Qin Qiang asked, "Where are you taking these?" The cook replied, What's it to you? My mother is unwell, so I just asked the storehouse manager for a few liters of millet and some dried vegetables to take home and wait for him to cook some porridge for her to rest. Upon hearing this, Chin Kiang suddenly realized, even I, a humble man, think of being filial to my mother. I, Chin Kiang, possess great skills but cannot care for her, leaving her at home, worrying and waiting. Thinking of this, he couldn't stop the tears from flowing. Seeing a worn-out pen on the table for bookkeeping, he quickly picked it up. Although he served in the government, he possessed a rudimentary knowledge of literature. He inscribed a few lines on the whitewashed wall. Driven by rhinoceroses and tigers, what is the reason for this journey, following the tracks to the ends of the earth? Amidst the white clouds, gazing longingly, his battle robe drips with blood. How can fish swim and leap in the ditches? How can rats and foxes understand the wings of a soaring rock? I ask heaven, what has hindered my return? My heart weeps. A 7-foot frame born of talent, a 3-foot sword, its gleam shining in the chest. What is the point of speaking of holding up the sky and the sun, leaving a name in the annals? My frosty brush paints the old green mountains. When will this fervent blood be poured out? I fear my youthful head will turn white in vain. Who knows? A poem in the style of Man Jiang Hong. Just as Xu Bao finished writing, a noisy group of people entered. Xu Bao looked closely and was startled to see Xingxin among them. With nowhere to hide, he could only lower his head and lean against the railing. Just then Wei Xuancheng shouted, "So this is it!" At that moment, Shan Xingxin rushed forward, grabbed Xu Bao with both hands and prostrated himself, saying, "Brother, you have suffered such misery in Lezhou. I, Shan Xingxin, cannot be your host and am ashamed to face the heroes and friends of the world." Xu Bao, seeing this, could hardly recognize him. He could only kneel down and kowtow, saying, "Brother, please rise. I fear my humble body is defiled and may offend your noble spirit." Xingxin wept, saying, "A friend's duty is death. If I could take your place, I would gladly give my life. What defilement is there in that?" Indeed. They have become a bond of fragrant orchids. Why care about traces in the clouds and mud? Looking back, Wei Xuancheng said, "Sir, the funeral rites for my late brother should be postponed for a few days. Brother Xubao is so alone, I cannot offer incense here. Please accept the offerings and gifts. I will go home with Brother Xubao. Once he is well, we will come to the temple to fulfill our vows, and then we can hold the funeral rites together. Wouldn't that be killing 2 birds with 1 stone?" He instructed his servant. "Master Qin cannot ride a horse. Bring a sedan chair." At that moment, the patrons outside, hearing that he was a friend of Master Shan, all dispersed in silence. Wei Xuancheng went to the crane pavilion, took out Xu Bao's clothes, 2 bolts of silk, a purple robe, a turban, and a dozen taels of silver, and presented them to Xingxin, handing them to Xu Bao. Xingxin thought to himself, "This is still the price of my horse." Xu Bao raised his hand in thanks, bid farewell to Xuancheng, and returned to Erxianzhuang with Xingxin. From then on, Wei Xuancheng, Qin Xubao, and Shan Xingxin became close friends. Upon arriving at the study, Xingxin bathed and dressed Xubao, laid out heavy bedding, and slept with him in the same bed. Xingxin spoke to Xubao, broadening his mind, and his illness was completely cured. Every day, he provided Xubao with nourishing food and even invited Wei Xuancheng to stay with him, treating him like family. Indeed. Do not yearn for a foreign land where life is better. Deep gratitude makes it home. However, Xu Bao's elderly mother in Shandong, her love for her son boundless, anxiously awaited his return day and night, her eyes blurred with longing. She often heard that the authorities wanted to arrest his family, and not knowing whether he was alive or dead, she consulted divination and fortune-telling, but the more she waited, the less he returned. Worrying, she fell seriously ill, confined to bed, unable to rise. Indeed. Her heart traveled 1,000 miles. Illness followed her sorrow. Fortunately, Xu Bao was good at making friends. Several close friends, knowing that Xu Bao had been away for a long time and that his mother was ill, gathered together to bring him some money for his care and to inquire after his mother's health. Chin's mother said, "It's rare for all my close friends and nephews to come and visit." She invited them into the inner room and seated them on the bed. There were 4 people in total. Jia Runfu, who lived with him outside the West Gate and now ran a whip-wielding business. 3 men from Kizhu City who worked with Xu Bao, Tang Wanren and Lion Ming, and Fan Jianwei, who had also been sent on a mission. Qin's mother sat on the bed, while Xu Bao's wife, Zhang, stood behind the bed, covered by a curtain. Seeing her son's friends sitting by her bedside, their grief palpable, Qin's mother couldn't help but shed tears. "My dear nephews," she said, "you've all come to see me, showing your kindness. But I wonder what has become of my son, Qin Qiang. He's gone and never returned. It breaks my heart." Jia Runfu and the others replied, "It's truly strange that our elder brother hasn't returned. Don't worry, Auntie, good fortune favors the virtuous. He'll likely be home soon." Qin's mother complained to Fan Jianwei, "My son left with you in June, burned paper money for his departure, and you returned in September. Now it's the dead of winter and there's been no news of him. He's probably no longer alive." Hearing her mother-in-law's words, the young woman dared not raise her voice but began to weep softly behind the curtains. Everyone unanimously complained to Fan Jianwei, "Fan Jianwei, what have you done? As the saying goes, those who travel together are never strangers. You all went out together. Don't you know why Brother Qin was delayed on the road? When should he have returned? Why hasn't he come home yet? Your mother only has him. He's been away for so long and she has no relatives to rely on. How can she not worry?" Fan Jianwei said, "Brothers, I dare not argue with your mother and sister-in-law who are complaining. You are all men of honor. Don't you know that home is best, but a journey is difficult?" He rushed from Shandong to Chang'an, but the Ministry of War delayed his arrival by 2 months. He finally received the approval on the 15th of August. Brother Qin arrived at Lintong Mountain and encountered Duke Tang being attacked by bandits. During the fight, Brother Qin intervened and saved Duke Tang. After leaving the pass, they hastily separated their belongings. He went to Lezhu, and I went to Zhezhou. Unexpectedly, all the travel money was in my trunk, and I only realized this after we parted ways. It was all used up on the journey. Now, unable to wait for his return, I'm sending him this as well. He placed a bag of silver in front of the bed. Qin's mother said, "I have 4 taels of silver. I told him to buy some silk from Lezhu. I'm sure he used it for his travel expenses." Fan Jianwei said, "When I arrived in Zhezhou, Governor Ma went to Taiyuan to congratulate Lord Tang and Lord Li. The 2 prisoners were being cared for at my humble abode, but firewood and rice were scarce. By the time I returned from my official duties, I had no money left for travel." Qin's mother said, "That's all your fault. Have you heard from my son since then?" Fan Jianwei said, "If we calculate the travel time, by the time Lord Tang and Lord Li arrived in Taiyuan, Brother Qin should have already arrived in Lezhu. At that time, Governor Kai hadn't even left yet. I've already sent the letter. I know Brother Qin is an impetuous man. Surely he wouldn't be delayed in Lezhu just to get a reply. If I had the travel expenses, I wouldn't have bothered going to Lezhu to find him and get a letter. But since I didn't have the travel expenses, I came here anyway, and how could I know Brother Qin hadn't even returned home yet?" The friends said, "That's understandable, but it's only right that you go to Lezhu to find Brother Xubao and bring him back, even though it's such a troublesome trip." Fan Jianwei said, "Auntie, don't worry. Just write a letter and I'll take it to Lezhu and find my brother." Madame Qin ordered her maid to fetch the writing implements, warmed the frozen brush, wrote a few words, sealed it, and gave it to Fan Jianwei along with the military silver he had returned, saying, "Take this silver for your travel expenses. It would be better to bring it back to him." Fan Jianwei replied, "I'll use my own travel expenses to get back to my elder brother. Why bother with his silver from the other day?" Madame Qin said, "You should take it. It's more convenient for both of you." The others said, "Now that we urgently need to find our elder brother, you should take more travel expenses. It's better to comply with your wishes, madam, Fan Jianwei said. In that case, I'll take my leave and go find my elder brother. Madam Qin said, It's not right for you to trouble yourself so far. The others placed the silver they had brought before Madam Qin's bedside and then dispersed. Fan Jianwei returned home, packed his belongings, and left Kizhu, heading straight for Lezhu in Hedong to find his uncle. Whether he found him or not, we'll find out in the next chapter.